Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the podcast. My name is Dennismary, your host of the podcast. Today, I have here with me my mentor, my longtime friend, Mr. Chika. Uh, I've known Chika for, I would say, 5 years right now. He has a very huge impact in my entrepreneurship journey. Right when I started this whole startup experience, I think he was there up until this moment. Right, so as I'm starting actually this journey, we are documenting what is happening in Web3, the startup space in Africa. I thought it's wise it would make a lot of sense to to bring him first on my show, kind of like talk to him. And we're having a very important conversation today. We're talking about the power of courage, what it takes to invest and build in Africa. Because the reason why Africa is so important is I will normally say Africa potential is in its people. And this is something I actually learned from Chika while with discussions over the last few years. And the people brings the people, the continent's value lies on these people. So I'm going to bring it up to you, Mr. Chika. Maybe just give a little bit introduction of yourself, what you do at Tiphub, and then talk a little bit about what you do at Google before we dive proper into the conversations.
Sure. As you mentioned, my name is Chika Umeadi. By day, I'm a product manager at Google. I work on asset automation and creative automation and creative guidance for our ad products, helping advertisers provide relevant and high quality assets so that they can achieve their campaign goals. I've been there for probably about the last 3 years. It's a really great experience. No 2 days are the same. It's a really exciting, really exciting line of work. By night, I started before Google started a company called Tiphub Ventures, which was focused on initially highlighting the narratives of entrepreneurs that were building solutions in the African diaspora space. And what essentially came of that is we transitioned into an investment vehicle. We actually started investing in companies that we were exploring and working with, and supporting them through connections, working to co-build with them. We were doing a lot of different things in that time. And so, Tiphub has evolved over the last couple of years. It's been about 8 years.
Mhm.
It'll be 9 years next year. So,
Wow.
and so, I think we're kind of at what's the word I'm looking for? We're at a kind of at a fork in the road, what to do with Tiphub. So it'll be an interesting next couple of months, see as things evolve.
Yeah, sure. Right. I think there is potential there, right? And you guys have the what will I say, the experience as well to actually do interesting things in the continent as well for Africans founders, both in diaspora and within Africa, and kind of like on the outlook for that. So I think you have a lot of experience in this space, advising companies in Africa, building as well. I think you have a great job going on at Tiphub. You guys have at Paris Call, I would like to mention. You guys have actually helped drive product innovation across board for clients and businesses across the spectrum. I don't know, maybe you can share a little bit insights of what Paris Call and the interesting stuff you guys are doing there, because before I jumped on the post, I think I looked it up and saw that you guys are kind of like still kicking out there as well. Don't know if you have anything to comment on that.
Yeah, one of the big things as we were working with companies, even early stage companies, is that step change innovation is hard. It requires a lot of resources. It requires a lot of coordination. And early stage companies, later stage companies, already established enterprises all struggled with that. And what we found is that we were really good at identifying bleeding edge technologies and then creating step change business models around them. And so we started doing that with Parallel Score. Parallel Score was a subsidiary, is like one of the first kind of experimental investments at the Tiphub side. Internally, what we do is we work with companies, big and small, and help them create a future state for tomorrow, which is combining user experience, products, mindset, business strategy, and engineering innovations. We help them create a future state for their business and for society. And so we've worked with companies in the United States. We've worked with companies in countries and companies in Africa. We've even worked with some European countries as well, or companies as well. And so we're in fact a global product company. It's one of those things that you don't think about it until you say it out loud. So yeah, we've been building on that for the last couple of years as well. And similarly, I think we're at a pivotal point in Parallel Score's career trajectory as well. So it's an exciting time to be around.
Yeah, definitely. I think you guys did a lot of work in a lot of projects, AI based, before even the coming of ChatGPT and stuff like that. So it's actually a very interesting company to check out. So if you check out parallelscore.com or .io or .ai, just look them up on Google. Yeah, very easy to find. So okay, let's dive deep into the conversation, right? Because right now, before I jumped on the podcast, I was talking with somebody in Ghana. So he talked about float finance, and then he talks about deal raised over $50 million, float finance raised around at $8 or something billion. Both companies have shut down just within August till now. Kind of like very scary. So I don't know, like, what are you seeing? Like, what is your current overview of like this current state of innovation with all these shutdowns happening across the spectrum? Like, what do you like? What is your proposition or the overview of the future with what is happening right now?
So there are a couple major trends that I think I need to highlight. So I'll fully answer this question. Yeah. One, most importantly, it's become cheaper than ever to build disruptive business models. I think with the advent of generative AI, LLMs, the decrease of computing power, the proliferation of really, really strong machine learning models and methodologies, where it is very cheap from a skill and the capabilities perspective to build disruptive companies. Simple as that. I don't think it's been easier in the history of the world, right? Now saying that, this also comes with challenges, right? So one, I think we're at a place where with a lot of these disruptive technologies, I'll say blockchain, I'll say, even 3D printing, like all these different things, right, that have happened since like mobile or internet or all these different things. We're in a place where the consumer hasn't really understood like the true value. Consumers don't understand the true value of what these technologies could do. And that means that the companies don't understand what the opportunities are as well, right? And so I think like that's one thing. Those are some trends right now that I think we should take into account. Another thing is that even though it's cheaper than ever to build disruptive business model products, it is more expensive. It is very expensive to scale, and then it's also very expensive to scale in regions that have not the best infrastructure, right? Because what you find is in a lot of African countries, a lot of African markets, a lot of these big startups that end up making it, they end up building a lot more than they need to, but they end up building a lot more than they want because they need to. Be it learning capacity, be it additional technical infrastructure, be it the more diversified sales and marketing strategy. You have companies taking on some of these larger opportunities, and as a result of that, not really aware. I think the market kind of prices it differently, and then the founders also price they also price things differently. So I also see that happening. And And then another thing too is capital is becoming. I guess capital was cheap last couple of years. Now, and not capital is expensive, right? But
Definitely.
capital is expensive at the same time that there's also a search for growth in alpha across the globe, right? People are
Yeah.
looking for places where they can get alpha, and we're seeing it kind of move in a bigger way when we look at some of these bigger deals in soccer, football, and entertainment, with what the Saudis are doing with live golf and some of the football things they're exploring, all of
Yeah.
the investments that they're making into these cities that they're building. Um, People are looking for alpha in very unique ways. Saudis just have billions of dollars, so that's how they're choosing to look for alpha. But I think as we start to look at population, even population trends, right? We're seeing
Yeah.
a decrease in birth rates across the Western world, and
Yeah.
so those are all. I think these are all major trends that we're starting to see manifest, and I think what we're trying to find out now is how, in this new reality, even with the geopolitical realities that we have, like how are we going to navigate growth? How are we going to navigate hyper growth on shaky foundations? That's the big
Sure.
question that a lot of markets in Africa are struggling with right now.
I think I like the viewpoints that you bring, right? Because one of the key things we've seen is that there is so much, because I mentioned something in the morning that I was having a conversation with somebody, talked about how the Second World War accelerated the impact of globalization and brought the world very closer with the establishment of the UN, things like the World Bank, things like the Bretton Woods system that created the dollar standard across board for international settlements, the rest of that. So, like, the interests are kind of like converging across board. Things like, as you mentioned, capital is very hard to get right now, and for a lot of companies, it's kind of becoming more interesting. Like the approach they actually taking to acquire customers and actually retain customers and also attract investors. Like within the African region right now, there is like within the crypto space in Africa, last 2 3 years there was a very big push to build out what's it called, Bitcoin infrastructure, trading infrastructure. Right now, we are seeing companies shutting down, focusing more on stable coins and building payment rails, and the rest of that. So, for me, I think with where everything is going right now, like the challenges and the opportunities are really like taking shape and taking form for what is going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. And the global macro geopolitics is kind of like shaping how this kind of conversation is happening with the BRICS. I don't really know if that's going to make a lot of sense over the long time, but we're seeing like on the political scenario, we're seeing that the dollarization, people are kind of moving away from the dollar and stuff like that, climate change and all the conversation. So I don't know, like, where do you see the challenges, right, and the opportunities for folks, right, actually when it has to do with the African building in Africa and African diaspora as well, like, because that is a very vocal concern for folks as well listening in. Like, where do you see the opportunities and the challenges, given all that is happening right now over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, the challenges, the opportunities and the challenges are both are twofold. I think you started with this. The people are the opportunity and they are the challenge.
Yeah.
And if you look at like markets that have to serve, so any market that has to serve basic needs for this increase in population that we're going to go over the next 25, even 5 to 10 years for sure, but like in the next 50 to 20 years, like any market or any company, any industry that's going to have to deal with that is going to be made, right? So for example, like food, right? So food
Yeah.
for me is the foundations of the conversation,
Yeah,
right?
definitely. Yeah.
Can we feed people? Can we educate people in a scalable way? Can
Yeah.
we make sure that people are healthy so that they can be productive members of society? can we
Yeah.
make sure people can pay one another to expand commerce and maintain an economic system that will support this large group of individuals, right?
Yeah. Yes.
It's really not rocket science, right? Like
It's not. It's not at all. I
you
think I like your perspective, right? Because funny enough, I had like at the Yuki here we have like a company we are working with. It's called Gonana Farm. So they are a commodity marketplace that helps African farmers be able to sell their goods, like e-commerce platform for African farmers. So I was having a conversation with him. He was telling me the sheer volume of transactions that move between farmers and how middleman people is destroying farmers' profits, and how the farmers goes in Jos and Kano in other places in Nigeria is being not properly like they are not being gotten to the final destination of where they need to be, and how these farmers, like how people, because we have this wave of farm crowd and the rest of that builds agricultural platform to help farmers grow their crops and maintain, but the last mile of like feeding people, I think seriously, I don't know, but I think I'll just bring it back to you again because I think it's a very interesting take, because food is something people don't think about. We always, how do you send money to this place? But the person sending money has to actually eat and has to actually be healthy before the person actually sends money. So, like, we eat every day, right? And it's rare for you to come to the continent of Africa and see companies building food tech solutions.
yeah, and once again, basic but I'm not. It is also challenging, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's challenging, so I'm not taking anything else. I think that's very much so. I think when you think of opportunities, I think about the foundational things.
Yeah,
Everything else will. So, I mean, I think people, you have a large population of people. People are gonna have to live somewhere. So, like
yeah,
construction tech, housing. Um, I think that's gonna be important. So I think like just fundamental thesis for the next 10 to 15 years is like you're gonna have you kind of have like 3 to 4 cohorts in Africa in terms of growth. Um, and then you have GDP growth that's gonna happen. You have population growth that's going to also drive GDP growth, and then you hope that politics kind of settles itself, right? Assuming that's the case, assuming that there's outside, there's moderate growth, better, more growth than the average. Um, these things will be held to be true. Like people have to eat, people need places to live, people need
yeah,
to get educated, people need to have good health care. Like I think what becomes the bigger question, right, is which one do you do first?
yeah,
Which one do you bet the house on? Right.
definitely.
And then and then also, which, I'll get to the challenges, like just reverse everything that I said, right? If
Yeah,
people right now we don't have enough houses for people here in
we
Africa
don't,
right now,
we
right?
don't.
The healthcare systems across, in most of the countries are in shambles, right? So like Nigeria, one doctor, one physician to 20,000 patients, right? Like
Yeah,
you're not gonna
true.
treat anybody like that. Um, Education, right? Like our education, we have good institutions. We have some really good institutions, but across the average, like the average institution, is not aligning with the current needs of the workforce, right?
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
how are you perpetuating, ongoing? So one, how are you perpetuating like ongoing, um, how are you perpetuating like this productive youth narrative, but also thinking that okay, life extension is happening. The way careers people think about careers is different now. The average person will
Yeah,
have 3 or 4 different careers in their life. So how are you thinking about transitioning your workforce? Like how are you thinking about transitioning your workforce, right? Um, while there are a lot of different things that I mentioned that are opportunities, and then all those things can be challenges. All those things are challenges, And then
Yeah.
I also want to add that there's nuance to everything, right? Like I know we don't just, just go build houses, just give people food. Like there's nuances to everything. But I think ultimately what you're looking at is like you don't need an overcomplicated thesis to make money.
True.
Looking at where we're going. And I think that's that's what I'm heading towards.
That's a very interesting take, right? Because I think I love the approach, definitely, because while it's unique, it's rare that you hear people talk about this like on the continent as well. So I believe there is this report that came out from decentralized.co. They talked about how Africa is coming online, like more and more people are coming online on the continent. And as more and more people comes online on the continent, the question becomes like, how do these people that comes online, how do they now able to generate income while they're online to be able to kind of like afford basic things to them for themselves? And that is the reason why actually when you look at most of these things, right? Because these things are what is driving the rest of the young population to maybe blockchain or Web3 as well. Because people are going there to make money for themselves, to be able to create wealth, so they can be able to afford things like housing, afford better healthcare, afford food, and afford every basic things they need to actually survive in modern day society. Because the reality is that these things are not readily available. The support infrastructures are not available for us. And you mentioned about education, right? Because for me, I have a very personal, like a very good respect for what Alt School is doing, right? Because they are giving the opportunity, like us Alt School, you lesson, Shimisha Gaya and the Wali, Yusuf and the rest of them, and so many edtech products. I think Bola is still doing something in this space. Bola Lawal as well with Scholar X, something like that. So I think all these things are very kind of like very important conversation because careers are changing. I have my junior sister came out of school recently. She's writing her final papers. I'm like, hey, come on, you're going to learn software engineering because there is never a time she's going to go look for a job in a bank and sit down there. Like, so like the institutions we have in Africa is really not preparing people for the for the future. I might say why we have like the curriculums we have right now available, but while we have wonderful schools, the society is changing and our educational system kind of like needs an update so that people can be able to meet up. Because if people can be able to go to work, be productive in society, they can be able to make money, to be able to afford basic needs like food, housing, and the rest of that. So I think it cuts across spectrums, and these opportunities, as you mentioned, are also challenges, and the challenges are also opportunities in some perspectives and some angles. So like from your experience, right, coming to the power of courage, because it takes courage to take the step to build on these opportunities and challenges. Like from your experience, like what do you think it really takes? Because you mentioned something at the beginning of the show. You said that it's really easy to actually build right now because the technologies are there. The AIs of the world are there, making things faster and easier for everybody. So like, what do you think it really takes? Like from your wealth of experience over the period of time, like what is that unique stuff that it takes for people to be able to build and invest in Africa generally?
Yeah, I think the two major things, like this could be a dissertation in itself. But
Yeah.
I think the people that have been successful on my from what I've seen, one they've rolled their they have nuanced point of view on what success looks like, and it's ever changing, right? So it's not like, and then they're also they're wise, but they understand they know nothing, right?
True. True.
And so I think the first one is, I kind of think of it as like you're winning. Your goal is to win battles in order to stay in the war.
Definitely.
And that's how people think about it. So like, how do I now optimize myself to be for each battle, knowing that there'll be small battles and that will ultimately drive like how successful I am. The battles will define me more than the war will.
Sure.
And what that means is like, it becomes very much tactical and less about, like, strategy is important. I agree, strategy is super important, but like it becomes more tactical. Like, what am I doing on a daily to make sure that we're set up for success
Yeah.
Who do I have, like, how am I taking advantage of, the resources I have? Where are the gaps, and how do I, instead of lamenting on my gaps, how do I play to the strengths that I have? And then on the second side, like, it's very, I think at a certain point, you know your stuff on, like, what the problems, and you have a hypothesis oftentimes, and you have a hypothesis, you have a way of working, but you're not married to it, right? And you are willing to adapt and adjust to the environment that's always changing, and the scenarios that are always changing, right? And when you're in that, when you go to, like, when you attack a problem, understanding that, like, you can't boil the ocean, where people oftentimes feel like you should be,
Yeah.
and then you also don't know what you don't know sometimes. All of those things, like, humble you in a way that allow you to be like a good founder. And so
Yeah.
I think a good founder and a good investor, right? And it leads you towards behaviors that ultimately drive you to, not necessarily, I don't want to say making better decisions. I just want to say making decisions in a more effective way.
Yeah.
And that's what those are, like, two nuanced perspectives on, like, I think what I've seen on, with people that have made money, um, on the investing side or on the startup side.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah,
I think that's a very interesting take, because I think it's not kind of like a cold coffee, it's like kind of a far conversation from home, right? Because it takes a lot of courage to actually stay here, because there's something GB will always say whenever he's talking about Flutterwave. He said, we are here for the long time. We are not going anywhere. No matter what happens, no matter what we face now, we are optimizing for the long term. We are here for the long conversation. So, like, staying in the game makes a lot of sense, right? Because the longer you stay, and not just because you are here, but as you are here, you're optimizing and getting better to kind of like make better decisions, to actually build better product. Because no matter how we want to say it, the technology does not build itself. We, like, people, I have this quote that if somebody say, technology is the future, I would say no, humans are, because it's we humans that determine what the future of technology is definitely going to be. We are the people that build we are people that build we are the people that build the what's it called, the innovations of the world, and the AIs and stuff of the world. So that brings me actually to the innovation conversation, right? Because at the beginning he talked about Web3, AI, blockchains, the gene editing, and so many other technologies that actually is on the loose right now. Because what we are seeing from the beginning of the year to now is Meta came out with the metaverse conversation. Recently, they kind of like Google, AI, what's it called? Apple is combating them. They are building, like, the VR battle is kind of on, of like, we're like, well, we are our digital experience. We now have to, like, experiences and live inside of it, right? We have the AIs, because AIs are really optimized the way everybody does things. Like, I don't know about any other person, but I almost use AI almost every day. I use ChatGPT, you use Bard, I use Cloud, I use so many AI tools, kind of like to make my productivity better. So, like, what, like, coming from Google, right? Like, what is your perspective of, like, the future of innovation for, like, folks as coming, given the rise of these emerging technologies, practically?
yeah. I think on the AI front, I think healthy competition is good. We saw that
Mm-hmm.
with ChatGPT. We saw that with OpenAI and Bard. Um, here's what I'll say.
Yeah.
The the innovations in LLM and generative AI are will be prolific. There are enough competitive models out there to kind of see, like, what happens, right?
Yeah.
I think after OpenAI launched theirs, every research institution and their moms added their generative AI and LLM model to GitHub. Like, so essentially everyone has this like there are a lot of open source models, right?
Yeah.
And I think what gets really exciting if we go back to like back in the day, like what has been the most disruptive experiences for excuse me, what has been the most disruptive experience economically? It's always been like what builds a platform, right?
Yeah.
Like I think there's the idea of the exchange of value and market, and that's pretty disruptive, and the ability of financial products in general is pretty disruptive. But if you look at like from the tech perspective, platforms are what like really drive like really interesting things, right? So I think
Yeah.
when I look at generative, like when I look at like the timeline, the pathway to innovation, what I'm interested in is like what is the next big platform, right? What is the next
Yeah.
big platform that we're all going to want to have to use, either because it's super cool or it solves a really big problem, or it creates a really unique experience for all of us, right? And that's where I think from an innovation perspective, we have to start, thinking about, because if we get bogged down, in the technology, and oftentimes this is the downfall of the builder. If we get bogged down on the technology, what ends up happening is that we miss out on the real value that we're creating for the users at the end of the day, right?
Sure.
And what
Yeah.
ends up happening is that by missing out on what the users want, we really miss out on like the real disruption, which
True.
I think ultimately tends to drive the market a little bit more than just tech advances in technology.
Interesting. So like more people focused innovation than kind of head on into technology making noise and the rest of it. I think that's a very pretty interesting take, right? Because at the end of the day, I will let's say no matter what you're building, whether in Web3, AI, wherever you are building it, you're building it for human beings, right? So like putting the humans in the front of the technology as you are building it and keeping them in mind, your customers, is actually a very good way to actually do build whatever you need to actually do as a person, and also as an innovator. So I think if you're listening in, definitely know that you have to put your customers first. That's just the basic conversation, right? Just put your customers first, put people in front, put your customers first. That's how we actually that's what the future is going to be. People is the future, and technology is just here to make the life of human beings better as we actually evolve as a species. So I think I
Yeah,
um yeah
yeah. No one, yeah. Like to go back to this, like no one's gonna ask if you use the Bard model or the Chat GPT model
yeah
or
sure,
the Amazon AWS model to generate text, right? Like that's
sure,
not going to be that's not what people are going to ask. They're going to
sure.
ask, with the text you generated for me, did you solve a pain point that like has been
Simple.
either impossible for me to solve or something that I hadn't even thought about? Um,
True.
that's what they're going to be looking for, and so we have to like we have to center these experiences around what value we can drive to the user.
That's interesting because there is this conversation about cloud computing that I had with somebody. So the person was talking about when the cloud computing era came out, there was so much noise and so much rush because we generally human when ChatGPT came out, everybody like went crazy, right? So when cloud computing came out, there was so much value. People were like cloud computing, At the end of the day, right? So many people are building so many solutions, but look at who won. People that was able to use the technology to kind of like help businesses create value for themselves, help businesses create apps, website they can use to actually reach their end users faster and better, optimize their services. Because I think the result determines the importance of the technology. If technology improves human lives and makes people's life better, it just becomes what it is. And the same thing applies to Web3 as well, because at the end of the day, if somebody can be able to leverage stable coins or whatsoever, users don't really care about the Satoshi, whatever, smart contracts. It's just we techie people that kind of like care about those things, because the average person on the street of Lagos just want to be able to send money to anybody, somebody, and it gets there and it gets delivered. They don't care whether you use coconut to do it. The main thing is it safe? Does it get to the destination? And then that's the end of the conversation for them, right? So I think providing value and putting people in the front is kind of a very powerful way to think about innovation specifically. So I think coming back to innovation and sustainability, because no matter how much value we create for users and the rest of that, we have to be able to build sustainable companies, because sustainable companies are what transforms the society. And at the end of the day, is what is there to be able to create employment, create jobs, and the rest of that make the society better, develop as well. So I think I mentioned this earlier on. I kind of like wanted to rewind it back as we wind up, right? What they are seeing on the continent right now is like there is so many shutdowns, right? Because there is around $50 million invested in deal, around 40 something in what's it called? In I can't remember the name, Float Finance and so many other things, 54 Gene in Nigeria, Laser Pay and the rest of that. Like, we've seen all these failures, right? It's very important for the industry and for the ecosystem to see these failures, and also for founders coming up to learn from this.
Wait, 54 genes shut down?
Yeah, they shut down. You haven't heard about it. They shut down.
Oh, so that's an acquisition target then. Okay.
Yeah.
Continue. Sorry.
Yeah, so no problem. So the founder moved on to start something different. I think the founder left the company to start something different. So they kind of like have issue. Even Twiga is having like a very bit of story. So what do you see about the importance of sustainable processes for startup growth? Because I don't know, companies in Africa generally are spending, I believe I want to believe that we are spending, as you mentioned earlier on, we are investing so much just to scale. Because you mentioned something that what is now costly before and now is the cost of scaling. What do you see about the importance of sustainability, right? In like what practices, like in startup growth generally, thank God you're coming from the art space at Google, like what do you think that we need to do to actually build better companies, acquire customers, retain them, and turn profit for investors?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is really it's tough to be prescriptive here, because it's very challenging when someone tells you to not raise money in a scarce environment, right? I don't think I think we have to think there are a couple of different things, and it's not just the founders, but I think from an ecosystem perspective, we need to provide more flexible and more accountable funding mechanisms to allow companies to scale in a way that makes sense to the region and not to the same like Western perception of hypergrowth in a very like well-developed established market. Right? So I think that's one, right? So we kind of have to change perceptions there and then think about what financial innovations we can bring to bear. Two, founders need to, and trust me, as someone that owns multiple businesses, I kind of, I understand the challenge here, but we need to start operating from a strengths-based perspective when we think about where some of the challenges and some of the opportunities are. We need to think about ways to be scrappier. We need to think about ways to, and in scrappier, I mean like literally like doing things that don't scale, but also kind of like being aware of how to balance that with actually building a sustainable company. Right.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy thing. I'm not saying like it's an easy thing that everybody can do, but it is something that like it's worth it. It's worth calling out. Right. I also think like investor founder fit is important. So like outside of just financial innovations, we need like, I think a lot of folks flat out lie, like, like a lot of investors lie, a lot of founders lie about, so a lot of investors lie about their patience. A lot of founders lie about like their ability to deliver. And I think like people just need to have candid conversations around like, let's get off the fact that we're doing this dance right now to see if you can fund us. And let's be like honest with you that like, you know, this is the reality we're facing, and you know, this might take longer than usual. The business is, you know, even at 54, I believed that the business opportunity for 54G was sustainable enough to like get to a point where it'd be acquired by some European pharma company.
Yeah.
I think that at a certain point you have to start thinking. I think a lot of investors, you know, a lot of investors will say, a lot of early stage investors will say, I don't like when founders are already thinking about exits, because it shows that their eye is not on like actually running the company. And like, I actually disagree with that. Like, I think founders that are actually very deliberate about building a company that is like building an acquisition first company, or building a company that can be acquired is a hard skill set in itself. And so I think thinking about how that could work could also be helpful when you think about it from a growth perspective, because then you don't have to like, you know what kind of growth you're reaching, you know what kind of growth you're optimizing for. And at that point you can, you know, hand it off. And I've always been adamant about, in frontier and emerging markets, the big, you get kind of government supported like entities that have a lot of money, but like a lot of the tech innovation comes from acquisitions from entities that want to enter the market. And I think that's one of the areas where I think we've missed the ball, specifically because there's been this like concern around founders being exit driven, which I disagree with. So yeah, those are a couple of things that I think about as you know, you kind of start to think about some of the companies that didn't make it. Like, of course, you know, and then another thing is math, right? Like, you know, everybody says the 1 in 10, right? So every 10 investments, one will be successful, right? So, you know, startups are difficult, startups are challenging, and oftentimes, you know, the math is not on your side. So you can't take it personally. All you can do is give yourself, you know, it comes back to the battles. Give yourself the chance to fight another day, and then make a serious call when that next day can come.
Definitely. I think it's a very difficult decision to shut down a company. I don't know, because I normally tell my friends, I was like, I don't know, man, these guys are come down and shut down after raising millions. Like, where do they find the courage to actually do the shutting down of something? Because I think it hinges on their personality and morals of different founders, and how they are kind of like how they're seeing what they're doing and the rest of that. But most times it's healthy to just bow out and go rest, and maybe look for another thing, because 54G already is doing something different, like similar company, but building another startup entirely. So I don't know, because there is never a very one size fit all answer to kind of like how you build sustainable growth models for companies. And there's something you mentioned that is actually a very personal view of mine, because companies have to be built with exit in mind. When you interact with some investors and you're kind of like told, oh, just want to get this acquired, I tend to like look at you like as if you're not going to be committed or something like that. But I think if you have a target as a founder, you have where you're looking at, you have like because it's a very long way to IPO for so many African companies. I don't know, but that's what my feel is, because look at how long it's taking Florida Wave to get to where they get to. Look at how long it took Jumia, for example, and even when they got to where they got to, they're not like doing very well, right? So I think Africa is a very tough place to actually build something, but there's a lot of opportunities here as well. So that brings me to the idea of like, because all these things comes down to, because if you have sustainable growth, then you can balance out long-term success. Like you can have like a 5 years roadmap and crush it across the board. Because like what's generally like speaking, because there has to be like a very good marriage between innovation and your long-term goals as a company, because we live to innovate and so many companies are innovating. Florida Wave just launched FXP to enable students to pay for school fees. Before they were just focusing on solving APIs. Now they're getting better. Paystack just launched a QR code payment solution to make it easy for people to be able to scan and pay. What's the name of these guys? Money Point just launched a mobile app. So there's so many innovation tied to their long-term success. So like, what advice do you have for founders specifically around this around this spectrum, right? How do we balance out innovation and long-term success? Like, how fast should we adopt new technologies generally, and like how fast should we actually, because most times there is also a cost to innovation, because innovation is not kind of free. There's also a cost to it. It kind of has some impact on your business model as well. So like, what do you have your opinion about it generally? Let me just stress it much further than that.
Yeah. So I think here's how I think about it, especially for founders, right? Like,
Yeah.
you kind of find yourselves in different points in times where things are just like super disruptive, and you've got to figure out like what you're doing, right? Like, so I would say generative AI and LLMs is one of those times. Like it's like the internet, mobile, kind of cloud. Like it's kind of like these like these changes that could like change the business model a little bit and create like unlock opportunities for you, right? So I am an adamant opponent of adversarial innovation. And I'm sure this has another kind of connotation somewhere else. But for me, adversarial innovation is like I'm always a fan of, trying to beat yourself, right? And so assuming you have, and I kind of look at the BCG growth, like for me, it's like the BCG growth matrix. It's kind of, you got your cash cow, your innovation bets, and like kind of all these different things that it's like a 4-quadrant. I forget the other boxes, but essentially your innovation investments, be it small, medium, or large, ideally the goal of your innovation investments are to create cash cows.
Yeah.
Right. Or and essentially what you should be doing is figuring out every kind of couple of quarters, every year, what are my major bets, right? What are the major bets that I want to make in a specific thing that is outside of my 80%, like of my 80% focus on generating revenue? Like, how can I disrupt myself? How can I disrupt this company? Like, what are the points of disruption that I can play around, right? And so my whole thing is like, figure out like what that looks like, and then experiment with it. Really try to bring it to the market, right? Try and bring out like either, alpha or beta or on something, and see what happens. And then let the market help you decide whether you should adopt an innovation or not. But figure out a way to evaluate and stress test the innovation in a way that's aligned with your strategy, with the hope that it should drive outsized returns for you. And that's, and I think like that's a very like generous pathway, right? Like, if I'm going to be investing in like bleeding edge technology as a startup, I really have to believe that like this is going to be transformative for me. But for most startups, I would probably say like, stay on the road that you're on with the roadmap you have to get you to where you're going. Unless this technology disrupts your roadmap, then I would say like, think of a new roadmap, think of new assumptions, figure out if you still have the same customers as you did, and then adjust. And then also be very adamant and be very vocal with your investors and with your customers. Like, hey, this happened. We're still trying to sort it out, but like, if you have ideas, let us know. And so I think the investors are also interested. They kind of feel, makes them feel like they're in the front lines of all the exciting work that's happening. So I think it's a really good call out to just say, like, it part of it is, building community around this challenge. The other part of it is experimentation. And the other part of it is knowing when, like, this disruption is disruptive to your current hypothesis of what your business model is. And I think between those two things, like, that should help kind of drive where and when you should make that decision.
Interesting. Yeah, I think if I should take something from what you said, right, adversarial innovation, it works every time, but it comes with its own nuance, right? Because it kind of dials down to the whole conversation, right? Because I think it's more people focused generally, because if as a company, you're always looking to how you can become better with what you're already doing, maybe not introducing new product line. How can I use what I'm doing, expand it more and make it more better? I think you end up providing more value to the customers that you're already serving, but you're not just going out there to kind of like start like looking for everybody that's in the market, but you get a niche, you're focused, you're innovating around that niche, you're making it kind of like you're kind of like innovating around it. Because this is one thing I appreciate so much about Nigerian banks. Because I was telling somebody the other day, Nigerian banks are so good in marketing, they are so good in acquiring customers, they are so good in retaining customers that no matter what happens, Nigerian banks are always making profits. No matter how bad the economy turns out to be, their numbers are always growing, the total number of deposits is always growing. And you ask yourself, how are these guys doing it? They are just so focused on optimizing what they have and how they could be able to get it. But because they were so focused on, okay, how do we get more people into the banks to come and deposit cash? They're not just kind of like thinking, oh, fintech app, blah, 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 blah. They're solving and stuff like, they're always kind of, how do we make this thing better? How do we make this thing better? This we're already doing, how do we make it better? I think it's actually very, until the likes of GTB and the rest of them start saying, okay, you know what, we have to actually get out of our shell and innovate and make things better and actually get, I think this is one thing that big organizations actually have the very good understanding of how to actually do and balance out the innovation for themselves along all their roadmaps and stuff like that. So I don't know, man. I think it's a very good thing to actually look out for as a founder. Find a way to become better as you build, and not just running after everything that comes out in the market. So I think we kind of like wrap it up, because we already have like a very interesting conversation. We could keep on going definitely, but we have to like work with time as well. So I think coming around the outlook for because that brings back to the work you're doing, right? Like, you mentioned some interesting conversations about what we should be looking out for Tiphub and the rest of that, but maybe like, what are you looking out for, like the outlook for innovation for African diasporas and the Africans and African diaspora as well? Because I think we've talked a lot about this across the conversation. Maybe kind of like wrap it up and then we'll give a recap and then kind of like go down to the audience questions and then drag it back home. Are you with me?
Yeah. I guess if I understood your question correctly, it's something I think it's another nuanced opportunity that I'd like to explore. Once again, I think it's a challenge to get people on the same page. And here's what it is. I think of like, we have Africans in the diaspora have a shared experience, which is African, but we also have like the other 50% experience, which is wherever we find ourselves, right? And then like that's diluted or amplified by like how we got to where we are, right? But what you tend to find is that while people are not a monolith, there are a lot of really interesting like commonalities with the African diaspora in general, between relationships between the African diaspora. For your folks, for the crypto and the finance folks, the first thing I always bring up is remittances, right? Like, someone is always sending money across multiple countries, right? Like that's
True.
a behavior that everybody has, right? We're always concerned about the healthcare of the loved ones back home, right?
Interesting.
We're always concerned, and there's always like this need to for a lot of us to hang on to what we have by still having assets in the regions that we came from, right? And so I think like that's one, when I think about like what that means, it's that becomes, that starts to open up a couple of things, right? So and we're starting to see what it really means, and I'll kind of talk to you about that as well. But like these shared experiences manifest themselves in multiple ways. The financial behaviors, as I mentioned, are important. Media and entertainment, kind of the rise of Afrobeats and Amapiano, kind of the forefathers of, or the children of, of Jamaica, reggae, and some of the Afrofusion work that has been done by our forefathers, and I think when you look at what that looks like, ultimately that creates once again another shared experience, right? So we look at Nollywood as well. We look at kind of the celebration of the entertainers and all the sports that we participate in. So there's a lot of shared experiences that are super essential to the overall African diaspora narrative. And so if we have all these shared experiences, then we have shared challenges, right? And so with shared challenges means that there's shared opportunities. And so I think ideally, and for me, if I had unlimited resources, my main focus would be highlighting and exposing some of the commonalities and some of the challenges that exist across the African diaspora. So how are Mexican, Afro-Mexicans, what kind of banking solutions are they building for inclusivity? What kind of remittance products are Europeans building for their African counterparts? What kind of entertainment opportunities are there for Africans in the United States? What does that market look like? And so that's how I start to think about these things, knowing that they'll most likely continue to expand as more people seek to leave the current countries they're in for these other markets. So, I think it's really important to call that out as not necessarily the next frontier of opportunity, but taking advantage or capitalizing on the already existing value that it may not be valued the right way.
Yeah, I think I would definitely say, if there's one thing I would say, I think it's been a very interesting conversation, definitely, because the last few points you made about, because no matter where you go, you're an African if you are from the continent, right? No matter where you find yourself, there's always these commonalities across borders. Almost every Africans have. There's this affinity we have amongst ourselves. Like when you connect with an African, whether in Australia or in China, it's more easier for you to acquaint yourself with them than every other people that are from different nationalities. And that is actually where the value and the what's it called? The value and opportunities are, right? According to what my guest said, I think from the beginning of the conversation, we kind of like bring it down from what is happening, the future is going to look like, and the power of courage. Because it takes courage to innovate, and also it takes sustainability to make sure that the innovation that you're implementing actually generates profit for you and for your investors and for your users as well. So I think it comes down to balancing out people and innovation, put people in front, and also innovate against yourself. try as much as possible to become better. Like, I don't know the philosopher that said that is a man, know thyself, right? There's always this need for we human beings to kind of like innovate and get better as we kind of like evolve on planet Earth as well. So I think before the show, we kind of like went to do the Yuki community, and because we shared some of the events that is coming up, kind of like asked if anybody has any questions for the upcoming guests we'll bring in on the show. So we have just two questions from the guests. So I'm just going to, from the audience, sorry. So none about listening right now, but definitely part of the broader Yuki comic book community. So, and many of them are definitely going to dial in after we share these recordings. So I want to find out like what's one of the question one? I don't know. One of the questions is what inspired you to become involved in investing and building startups in Africa? That is the first question. You just have only two questions. Like the first one is what inspired you to become invested and interested in investing in Africa and building companies in Africa?
Yeah, I think the first thing that inspired me was the idea of sustainable economic impact, right? Like, I think there's a geopolitical dance around international development, and I think international development has its place. I think grant money has its place, but I also think like if we can find more sustainable solutions to businesses and challenges we have, that creates a better reality for everyone. So I started to look at Africa. I started to look at building and investing in businesses as a more sustainable opportunity that, being the person that is, donating X, Y, and Z. I'd rather I'll put, invest money and then also invest my time.
Yeah, I think the next question, which is the last, is how does Tiphub choose startup they work with, and what criteria is kind of like most important to you guys? So
Yeah, so we don't operate like a traditional fund. Like a lot of it comes from the partner. A lot of the capital comes from the partners. So we kind of get the freedom to do whatever we want. And so what that also means is that like from a thesis perspective, we're very long-term based, like I think about some of the founders invested in, known that for several years. Sometimes it's not even their first startup that we're investing in. But we do value relationships significantly. That's something that's important to us. Second off, we look for business models that kind of hit three different areas. And we kind of think of it as disruptive heroes, companies that are either disrupting traditional or standard business models. Two, we look at market organizers, markets that are taking unorganized markets and creating like a structure in between them. And then I look for market insight drivers. So markets or products that help drive additional insights into a black box, or a market that maybe does not have as much information sharing out.
Yeah, that's actually a very nice insight. So you guys should reach out. Just go to tiphub.vc. Anybody that wants to get in touch with them, just go to tiphub.vc. You can also reach out to them, connect with Chika on Twitter and also on LinkedIn as well. Just search Chika Umeadi. You're going to see him there. So I think I want to thank you for coming on here, right, to kind of share these insights, because it's not every day that most folks on the continent have the opportunity to hear somebody that has this worth of experience talk about how they view the continent, how they view innovation, and how they view what the future is going to look like. Because I'm going to read these quotes from your thesis that you wrote in 2019, 2020. You said something that you can do well by doing good, right? Purpose and profit doesn't have to be at odds. And most important, and that doesn't have to be at odds. And more importantly, it needs to align to unlock the real value in Africa. Purpose-driven companies need technology to scale their impact, create viable business models, and relationships that can get the Pan-African scale. Technologies combined with unique solutions create an opportunity that unlocks significant value for all stakeholders. A community of stakeholders, companies, and founders will raise all boats. So on that note, I just read that from the Tiphub playbook as well. So from that note, I will say thank you, Mr. Chika, for coming up to talk with us. I think it's a very interesting conversation. I think we enjoyed it myself. So I don't know, closing thoughts before we call it a day. Anything you have to say before we kind of wrap it up? Anything at all?
No, I thanks for having me on, and
Yeah.
I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, Kirsten. Thank you. Thank you everybody for today and listening in as well. So remember, the Frontiers. The cast is brought to you by the Frontiers, which is the Yuki podcast network. So we're going to be sharing the show probably by you will receiving and be streaming it on YouTube. You're also streaming the on Spotify, Apple, and everywhere you listen to your podcast. We want to thank our community. It's been a very amazing journey